Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Old Hunt, where we are still celebrating 10 years of Bloodborne. We are playing through version 1.00 of the Japanese release, and last time we made our way through, I was going to say the poison swamp, one of the poison swamps of the Nightmare Frontier. Or rather, we went in one of the two possible directions we could go through one of the poison swamps in the Nightmare Frontier. There's two of them, really, and the first of them is kind of big, and it sort of feels like it's in two main sections with a narrow passage connecting the two, but that's more technical than I need to be getting. We made our way through the Trial of the Swamp, part one, really, to make our way here. We had to defeat a bunch of enemies. I had to do it over and over and over again, and then ultimately, after much struggle, managed to defeat the Winter Lantern, which is the name of that enemy that sort of causes frenzy and is a horrific version of the doll that sings to itself, and it just wants to give you a nice hug. And the fact that its very existence is terrifying death is a mere side effect. Anyway, we struggled with that enemy, and after all that, we finally collected an item here. And this item, well, we're not really going to use it. We're playing offline, and the best use of it is online. But we can still take a look at the description and learn some interesting things. If I go to the right category. There we go. It's right down here. So this is the Messenger's Gift. And that title is pretty straightforward, right? The other thing that we could say potentially is that this could be the gift of a specific messenger, right? Because Japanese doesn't necessarily specify. But we'll see when we get to the description. No, it seems like it's plural, right? It seems to be the gift of the messengers, if we're going to be a little bit more literal in our translation than messenger's gift. I think, messenger's gift is appropriate for an item name. But let's get on to the actual description here. Okay, we have a long, set of sections that are sort of all modifying. Part of it's modifying the first section with the comma is modifying the second section with the comma, which is all modifying the final portion, which ends in the word gift again, right? So, strange gift of the messengers who lurk in nightmares and adore or maybe worship hunters, right? And so we're getting a little bit of repeated information here, right? Remember how the doll said the little ones in reference to the messengers, inhabitants of the dream, right? I think the idea here is that messengers, again, I think this ties in with the idea that they're sort of the spirits of the dead. We can think of the nightmare realms as a sort of set of afterlives. And this gets really clear in the DLC, where you're sort of dealing with famous ghosts and personalities from Bloodborne's lore that live on even though they should have died. But the DLC doesn't exist in this version of the game, so it's a little bit harder to work it out. Not impossible, but harder. It's going to take us a while to get to the quest line that will allow us to unlock that particular evidence. But you can think of nightmares as like the afterlife, and this works very well with the idea of messengers as spirits of the dead, right? Why do they adore the hunters? That's never really made clear, but maybe the reason they adore the hunters is that the life force of the hunters is so strong that they have the possibility to return to reality, right? This sort of ties in with my crazy lore theory that we die at the start of the game, and in some form, we go on in our tie to the dream. That's what allows us to continue. And once that's been established, right, there's a way in which we can sort of claw our way back to reality, or maybe a couple of different ways, one of which is more hidden away than the other. But maybe that's got something to do with why the messengers revere the hunters as much as they do, because we get a lot of evidence that the messengers sort of exist to serve the hunters, and they do so because of some amount of respect or admiration. Now, we're also given to understand that respect, admiration, trust, whatever, is sometimes a little bit superfluous, right? They've got the badges, and badges sort of have passed from meaning, and only the messengers give them any respect. And the badges are the way that by earning the respect of the messengers, you get more items from the shop, right? So there is that sense of messengers. You could think of it as remembering the values of the past, right? That would be in line with their nature as spirits of the dead, because these are people who would know the old ways because they're from the old times, right? And so they recognize the old badges, where everyone else in the world of the living has sort of moved on from them, but the messengers still remember. And whether or not that has any true value is sort of up to you, right? Maybe that's the reason that the wording in, I forget which badge it was, it might be the Saw Hunter badge, it's one of the very first ones we get. Maybe that's the reason why they cast a little bit of doubt on the value judgment of the messengers, because maybe what's valuable to them, right, doesn't have inherent value, but the value has shifted over time. And while there is some value in remembering things from the past, so there's also value in moving past those values. I don't know. Interesting thought, though. And we're just at the first line. Let's move on. Okay, the user is enveloped in a nightmarish black mist, or a black nightmarish mist. Black nightmarish mist, right? Black is listed first in Japanese. So you have black nightmare, and then that's modifying like mist or haze or fog, right? So could really be either way, right? I think it's probably just sort of like the black mist of nightmares, right? I think that's the way that we can take it. So this fog, mist, what have you, surrounds you. It is black in color, and it is related to nightmares. And as it envelops you, the user, it then immediately afterward gives you the appearance of a messenger, right? So I put in a little bit of summary in the middle of that translation, but so let me go one more time from the top. The user is enveloped in a nightmarish black mist, and immediately afterwards gains the appearance of a messenger, gains the form of a messenger. And that's very literally what happens, right? You use this item, you'll transform into a messenger. I'm going to use it as soon as I'm done with this description, so you can actually see it in action. But for now, let's just sort of move on from that. That is a form of child's play-like illusion, right? I'm not sure the best way to do Jigi Genso, right? Jigi, like, I think it's been translated as child's play or something to that effect. It technically means like a parlor trick, but if you look very carefully, like the first kanji means like infant or child, and then the second kanji means play, right? So the idea is it's a cheap trick, and then Genso is illusion, right? So it's a cheap trick of an illusion. And all of that is modifying like sort of, right? It's a sort of cheap illusory trick. But the word child's play is sort of in there, right? And I was talking about how I think the messengers are conceptually linked to the dead. I think the messengers are pretty clearly, through the term jigi, in Japanese anyway, they're always identified as like playful, misunderstood, they're little, right? I think you can take away this understanding of messengers being the spirits of not just any dead, but possibly dead children. I don't think that tie is non-existent. I don't know exactly how strong it is, but I do think you can make that association. Sort of iffy on how much I go in for that idea, but there's something there. I think all that association with childishness, it could just be a way of saying that the messengers, maybe in dying, like the spirits sort of forget part of themselves and become more childlike. That's also possible. But maybe, right, these are the spirits of dead children who are respecting us, maybe because we as hunters, in addition to just being, more powerful spirits in the afterlife of the nightmare realms, are grown-ups. So maybe that's part of it? I don't know. Anyway, that's just the first half of the second to last line. Moving on. Okay, so large movements or actions will break that illusion, right? Because it's just a minor level illusion, right? It's an illusion on the level of child's play. Big movements will go right through it. Presumably this is, if it was a more impressive illusion, more oppressive magic that was at work, if we can use the magic term, if it was, more deeply arcane study had gone into the creation of this illusion, you could do it and still get away with large movements. But you can't maintain this, false appearance of a messenger and also be like running around. Okay, and then finally, we're just getting reinforcement from the final line there. Likely the most that can be managed is slow movement, right? Something to that effect. So we're going to, put that final portion sort of on display here. I'm just going to go and say use. And look what's happened to us. We're just a bunch of little messengers, and we've got our little message. And hey, we can sort of move slowly around. I don't want to go too far because I'll go into the poison swamp. But this is about as fast as we can go. But if we try and do anything big, like use the Augur of Abratus, we break right through that spell, and ta-da, we are revealed as what we are. So that's how that works. And like I said, its primary utility is in PvP, right? Because it's not like we can use this to sneak past enemies. The enemies will still recognize us for what we are, particularly if we want to go through the poison swamp here. It'd be a very bad idea because we have to move super slow. But the enemies are still going to you're not going to fool any of them, at least not in your own world. But if you go to invade someone and you want to pose as a bunch of messengers holding up a message and then ambush them, this item gives you that capability. And I never play the PvP in this game, so I've never done it. But it is sort of cool that you can turn yourself into a group of messengers like you're any other sort of innocent message that might be going on in the game that, potentially players have left. I think that's kind of a fun idea, even though I've never really experienced it either as a victim or as a perpetrator. So there you go. Anyway, let's get off the Augur of Abratus back to an antidote. And I think there are some Wandering Madnesses that may have respawned. Yeah, I already killed the big one in one of my many runs to figure out what was the best way to deal with the... can I get any? Nope, they're already gone. All right, well, I got the one. That's cool. I got the one. I'll be satisfied with that. And, okay, I am going to warp back to the dream because I have learned my lesson. I have... The next section is going to be difficult, and I sort of came around full circle, essentially. I looked when I was in editing, and at the start of the last episode, I have about as many blood echoes as I have now. Maybe a little bit more now that I killed that Wandering Madness, but it sort of came around, and I feel like I got away with something by doing that. And it's quite likely that I'll die in the next section of the Nightmare Frontier, so I'm just going to warp back to the dream so I don't have to deal with any of that, spend my blood echoes, and we'll get back to our Nightmare Frontier explorations pretty soon. Nope. Nope. Don't get poisoned, please. Oh, great. Maybe it won't matter that I get poisoned if I warp back to the dream. Aha! Well, on the one hand, that means I'm not poisoned. On the other hand, that also means I wasted an antidote. But, antidotes aren't really going to be useful for that much longer, right? We have more of the poison swamp to discover, so I'm going to grab some out of storage here. Also, do I have more sedatives? I could have sworn I got more sedatives. Oh, they'd be here if I did. I can get them by killing those scholars in the Nightmare Frontier. Not the Frontier, the Nightmare Lecture Building. Maybe that's going to be worthwhile. Also, are my blood vials really that low? Am I down to 15? I was just in this box here. They are. Oh, great. Okay, so, I think what's going to happen here is I'm going to have to pause my recording and do a little bit of farming to get some sedatives and blood vials and blood echoes. But before I do that, I'm going to talk to the doll here. I'm going to grab another level. I didn't mind, actually, that time that I instantly selected Vitality, because that's the stat that I'm boosting right now. All right, and might as well pick up some blood vials already to start the grinding. There we are. All right, so I've got, 12 in storage and then 48 in storage. Okay. All right, well, we're going to up those numbers, and I think I will just say goodbye for now, and when I see you again in the dream, I should be much better stocked. All right, I am not quite done with the farming runs here, but I figured I should show this, right? I think I've mentioned before, like, what my general path was at an earlier farming spot. There are various farming spots, depending on how far you've gotten through the game, where you can sort of efficiently get lots of blood vials in particular, but other things as well. And I thought this was worth highlighting because this is a 10-year celebration of everything that is Bloodborne, and this is an aspect of Bloodborne that I don't think anybody really wants to celebrate, which is you just have to, it breaks the flow, right? You get into this state where you want to progress in the game. You saw it in the playthrough so far, right? I was all ready to go, ready to pick things up where I left off and start exploring more into the Nightmare Frontier, and I was like, wait, I'm low on resources, I gotta fix that, right? It completely stops the momentum. And I've heard some people say in the game's defense, and I don't know if the developers were thinking this or not, that the limited nature of blood vials, right, the fact that they're a limited resource that you always have to be keeping an eye on, is sort of a survival horror mechanic, right? Because it makes you wonder, like, where your next blood vials are going to be coming from. And you have to carefully manage your inventory. This is also a potential reason why, you can see I've got 10 Molotov cocktails here. I can't hold any more of that in my immediate inventory. Oops. I wanted to open the box first, right? Come over here. I've got 17 Molotov cocktails stashed away here. I can't hold all 27, right? So this is also potentially the reason, gameplay-wise, why they would put these limits on the amount of items that you would have, right? There's a game balance issue, but there's also a scarcity issue, because you have to make the most of limited resources, and as the resources start to dwindle, you start to feel sort of the dread of being low on those resources. And on the one hand, I think there's something to that, but on the other hand, I feel like it ends up, the way that it plays, it just ends up being a hassle, right? Not the limits, right? I think that works pretty well on the whole, right? I don't mind being limited to just 10 Molotov cocktails on my person. I do think that that is a situation where, you know, okay, I've got a certain maximum that I can carry on me, and I have to be very thoughtful about when or if I want to use Molotov cocktails in any given situation. That creates an interesting sort of back and forth in the gameplay. And because Molotov cocktails are kind of an extra, right? Unlike blood vials are part of like the basic way that you play Bloodborne, because they're how you heal, and you're probably going to be taking damage, and so it's a good idea to have access to the healing, right? Whereas Molotov cocktails, you've got plenty of other sources for damage that don't run out. They're much more sort of an opt-in part of Bloodborne. And because of that, the fact that if you completely run out of Molotov cocktails, both here and in the storage box, then, okay, you'll feel the pain a little, but it won't be as severe as if all of a sudden you can't heal anymore. And you're going to have to be healing all the time because this is Bloodborne, right? So that's a potential, what am I saying potential? That's, I think, a serious issue with the blood vial system, right? If they were to limit you to, like if you essentially had what was the Estus system, except they changed, right? Because I think Estus, you only start out with 5, or you go up to like 10. It gets as high as 20, whereas blood vials, you start with 20, and then with runes, you can boost it even higher, right? So the maximum on blood vials is pretty high, actually, but I mean, higher than you would probably think of for a game if this whole survival horror thing is supposed to be part of the equation. I just feel like that doesn't really come through. What you really end up with is a lot of frustration, especially as the healing resources in your supply just dwindle down to nothing, and you just have to go and farm and farm and farm. So it's not a fun part of the game, right? But I've almost got everything I need. I don't remember if I showed you or if you saw when I was looking at the box. I've got 73 blood vials stashed away now. I think that's a good number. I've got a maximum number of Quicksilver bullets. That is in part due to the nature of where I am farming, and I wanted to show you what that consists of. Get that on screen, because for better or worse, this is part of the game. Yeah, I think I'll probably do what I did with the alternative reality episode and provide like timestamps for the YouTube video so that you can skip past this chapter if you don't want to watch me farm. But this is how this goes. There's a 50-50 chance. Oh, yep, there we go. He grabbed me. I was going to say, there's a 50-50 chance when I hit that guy that he's going to grab me. So if he gets the grab off, I come over here. And there's a reason I've got all these Molotov cocktails on my hotbar here. It's because of that. Right? Also, this is Bloodborne at some of its ugliest, because it's really not designed to have this many enemies on the screen at once, right? But we'll make it work. I don't really like to use more than 4 Molotov cocktails per run of these enemies. But even so, right, I think you can see how that really does a good job of thinning down the numbers to the point where things get much more manageable. And there are two students. This has always been kind of a fun thing for me. There are two students who just will leave you alone. They're just slumped in their chairs and they don't have a care. The others all will attack you. And I'm checking these because most of the time, these will contain Quicksilver bullets. That's why I've maxed out my Quicksilver bullets without having to sort of purchase any. And each one of these stacks contains 3 Quicksilver bullets. So I maxed out my Quicksilver bullets very quickly. But there is a chance that... okay, that's just a artifact thing. Okay. There is a chance that one of these drops will be sedatives. And just to show you, I have 3. So it's pretty rare, right? Because I maxed out my Quicksilver bullets, but my sedatives, in all of these different runs, I've only gotten 3 of them. And it's, right now, this is, like, basically our only source of sedatives. Enjoy that. That's always a fun way for me to end the run. Like, if I'm thinking in terms of, like, pure efficiency in farming, it's a waste of time to use that superpowered attack. But it's just so fun. Gotta have some fun while you're doing this sort of thing. And as you can see, that gives you a ton of blood echoes, right? I'm now up to 42,000. And it's something around, because I have one of the moon runes on, right? This isn't the base number. I'm slightly boosting the amount of blood echoes that I get per run. But it's something like 14,000 per run through this place. So as you can see, this is the result of roughly 3 runs. I've got 42,000 blood echoes. And so in selecting this particular farming location, it's best for getting you blood echoes, but you can use blood echoes at the shop in the Hunter's Dream to pick up lots of blood vials. And particularly because this is 1.00 and you're capped at 99 and not 600, right? You'll hit that cap sooner rather than later. So there's that aspect of things, right? So you get a bunch of blood echoes, and as long as you're not, like, you could be doing this to level up. I don't really feel like I need to be doing it to level up. I feel like I'm pretty happy with where I am level-wise right now. So I'm not, looking to boost my levels this way. But it's a great way to boost blood vials, even though you're not directly getting blood vials, because you can burn all the blood echoes on the blood vials. And also, you can get the Quicksilver bullets. I've maxed them out. That was no problem at all, because frequent drops of Quicksilver bullets. And you can occasionally stock up on sedatives. And I definitely want sedatives. They're not easy to get at this point in the game. So I wanted to get some. 3 is, maybe less than I would like, but it's probably enough for what I need. But there's another reason why I've been stockpiling. I wanted to get over 36,000 blood echoes, which I'll see when we go back. Well, I'll show you when we get back to the dream. All right, so put simply, I forgot that there are a number of armor sets waiting for me here in the dream. So only one of them can be purchased with blood echoes, but I want to get these out of the shop and into my hands. So let's go take a look at these, right, because they're all lined up nice and neat here. And we can see that all of these descriptions are going to be the same. And here we are going to be looking at the Tomb Raider set, as I like to call it. I think for pretty obvious legal reasons, the official translators couldn't call this the Tomb Raider set, or, the Tomb Raider hood, garb, gloves, and trousers they would have used. I would say pants, but I'm an American English speaker, and they're they're British English speakers, so, that's fine. These are, right, they're quite literally exposing or revealing tombs, and possibly, it's been a while since I did this, in-depth linguistic research, but possibly, actually going in and taking, right? So that's why I call it the Tomb Raider set. But I believe the official translators use Tomb Prospector. Yeah, no, I remember that 100% now. This is the Tomb Prospector set in official translation. And if you can't use Tomb Raider, I think Tomb Prospector is pretty good, because that's what they're doing, right? They're looting through the graves, right? They're going into... presumably, I haven't read the description yet, and I completely forget, but presumably these are people going into the Tomb of the Gods, and they're raiding it, right? They're grabbing whatever they can because they're in search of arcane powers and mysteries, and they want to delve into the secrets of this world, right? We know from the Augur of Ebrietas that it's been on what I interpret as 2 separate occasions, the beginning of a search for the cosmos in the underground labyrinth, right? So all this stuff that's going on in the Chalice dungeons, Healing Church is very interested in that, and the people who delve into those things and, go into those deep mysteries and raid all and grab all that stuff, right? It's they're called tomb prospectors, and prospector, like it's just good, right? They're prospecting, they're going in, they're searching for arcane treasures, really. Anyway, let's read the description so we get a little bit more verification on that. Right, yeah, so it's right in the first line. Attire of tomb raiders who particularly delve into the underground ruins, even within the healing church. Right, and that's a little bit... I don't know how much I like the way that I've connected those phrases, because the nakademo, right? So the idea that even within the healing church. So there's the idea that that would sort of be unexpected. You might not expect in the healing church there to be people who are dedicated to delving into the tombs, right? Into the underground ruins. But they are there, right? There are those who specialize, even within the healing church, of going into the underground labyrinth. And they're, by implication, it's not saying they're called tomb raiders, right? But this is the attire of tomb raiders who, even in the healing church, go and specialize in going into the underground ruins. So I think that's a good summary of all the ideas there. Let's move on to the central section. The fountainhead or headwaters of the healing church is Bergenworth, right? So we're seeing, right, the healing church has its origins in Bergenworth is the idea, right? We've seen it before, right? They sort of use this idea of the main stream, right, of the headwaters, right? That sort of metaphor being applied to the relationship between Bergenworth and the healing church. I don't think personally that that's particularly significant, but you could make something out of it, that is a very consistent metaphor that the Japanese description writers are using, right? So Bergenworth is sort of the headwaters, the fountainhead of the healing church. But that's just sort of a short section there at the start of that central portion, right? Well, let's go on to the second line. Second line in the central section. Therefore, they know what the ruins are. Yeah, so I think the idea is, right, they had this whole thing at Bergenworth of delving into the underground ruins, the Tomb of the Gods, very significant place, and they had this encounter with the Eldritch Truth that we were talking about a couple episodes back, and there's this inquiry into the cosmos, and so because of the lineage that connects the healing church to Bergenworth, that particular bit of knowledge hasn't been lost, right? My speculation is that, you know, they went down, they had the encounter with Ebrietas, that creates this fervor, they start looking for arcane things, eventually they find the old blood, that becomes the foundation of the healing church, and they sort of get locked out from the maybe traditional entrance by the School of Bergenworth, but they've got another way in, right? We know that at least part of the healing church, we haven't gotten there yet, but they have their own means of accessing the labyrinth, and they know of its significance, right? They know that back in the day, Bergenworth was super interested in it, and maybe they've lost some of that fear around the old blood. Maybe that's started to morph over time, as you can sort of see in the changing of the adage of the healing church as the ages have gone on. But what they haven't lost is this idea that the underground ruins hold important secrets, the mysteries of the universe, right? And the other thing, right, Willem had his mind blown by Ebrietas, in my interpretation, my understanding, not the blood. And he's consistent in thinking that, okay, what we need isn't blood, it's the holy mystery, right? It's this ascension unto godhood, and the vehicle, right, that everyone else seems to be so happy with, the blood, isn't the one that he believes in. He wants to elevate his thoughts. I can't remember if I've read that description or not. We'll get there if we haven't already. And that's sort of his line of thinking, right? I think maybe you can infer from this that, just because people are interested in delving into the underground ruins, they're not necessarily interested in going down there for one thing or another, right? They don't necessarily know what the key will be, but they think that there is the key down there to ascension, to understanding the cosmos, right? And you had this split, right, between old blood and maybe it's something else, or maybe it's something within, right? Maybe the labyrinth will show us the way, but we have to work on ourselves. I don't really know, right? This is pretty murky. But one way or another, right, what this central section tells us is that thanks to the lineage of Bergenworth, the Healing Church is still aware of the importance of the underground ruins, and so there are people who specialize in going down there. They're known as Tomb Raiders, right? So that's what we've gotten so far. And let's do the final section. Oh, here we go. Look, it's just going to tell us. Okay. So they, I think, because we're talking about, they know the tomb prospectors, that is, or the church, the Healing Church, knows what the underground labyrinth is. And then first thing in that next line, so second to last line in the entire description, we have that, Sorewa. And I think that's a reference back to the underground ruins, right? The labyrinth. So that is not simply a treasure hoard for becoming the strength of the hunters, right? So this is verifying that it's the same place, right? When Gehrman tells us about the Tomb of the Gods and like going down in there as, you know, every hunter before you has will grant you strength, right? This idea that the Chalice dungeons are a place for hunters to search for treasures that will give them power, right? The Healing Church knows that there's more to it than just what the hunters can plunder for themselves and gain in terms of power. And what is more than that? Let's look at the final line. They are the path to attempting to witness or have audience with the holy mystery of the old higher rank ones, the old great ones, right? So I think that is pointing us in the direction of, so the Healing Church knows the true significance of the underground ruins, which is, I'm going to say having audience with, it could just be witness, but again, that's one of the central ambiguities of the linguistics of Bloodborne, right? There, unless you get a voiced line, right? Like you have Patches the Spider, the Spider-Man guy that I've been talking about in the past few episodes. He is Patches, right, which is a recurring character throughout the Soulsborne games. This is how I was saying, if they knew, the translators knew what character they were translating for, they would have an idea where the quest line was going to go, because the Patches storyline, he's always a character who tries to trick the player character into going after a treasure and then attacks them from behind to expose them to danger, right? That's sort of the basic recurring gimmick of Patches. Usually kicks you down from somewhere by distracting you from a treasure down below, and it puts you in danger. Anyway, Patches has a dialogue where if you have the Japanese voices on, you can hear him say Mamieru at one point in his lines. But every time we see this kanji in text, we simply have to guess. Oh, and while we're on the subject of Patches, there's also the form of his temptation to consider. Patches is telling us that, the gift of the Godhead will grant you strength, and that is the sort of enticement that I think, the Healing Church might be going after, right? They want audience with the arcane mystery of the ancient or the old great ones. And so it's sort of what he promises us. And it's what the Healing Church is after too. And they're going after it not by going to nightmares, but by going down into the Chalice dungeons. Or maybe the Chalice dungeons are nightmares, right? What exactly the Chalice dungeons are is kind of an open question that you can't really fully answer. But I don't necessarily know if I want to get into all the details of that in this particular episode. Suffice it to say, you could sort of interpret them as, right, particularly the way that we access them, using holy chalices from the hunter's dream, right? It's possible that we're going back in time when we go into the chalices. It's possible that we are going to a place in the real world with the holy chalices. It's possible that we're going to a nightmare with the holy chalices. It's possible that we're going to another world. I hadn't heard that one before, but I recently got a comment and they were saying, maybe the chalices that we go to are sort of crossing the boundary, right? They're like an alternate reality. If we know that there are other worlds in the sort of universe, multiverse of Bloodborne, then maybe the chalices we go to are different worlds than our own. Possible, right? I hadn't thought about that possibility before. I'd mostly just gone between the nightmare realm as opposed to back in time idea of the physical real world. So I don't know what's going on with the chalices. But we've got people who are exploring them all the time, and that's all they do. And the Healing Church cares about that. Bergenworth cared about that. We care about that as a hunter, right? The hunters care about that. Literally everybody cares about the Chalice dungeons, except a lot of the players, which is unfortunate. But anyway, let's buy all this stuff. That's what we're here to do. There we go. And we've got a good 6,000 left over. So, well, first of all, let's put the stuff on, because I will forget. Okay, here we go. All right, now we are Tomb Prospectors, and we're ready to go. Well, not quite, because I want to see what else I can get with these. All right, 73, like I said, I think that's probably fine. I'm happy with that. Let's buy a few more Molotov cocktails. They've been very handy. Okay, I think now we are ready to return to the Nightmare Frontier and make a little bit of progress with the rest of this episode. So I'll see you again shortly. Okay, we're back in this mysterious nightmare realm, and now I have finally dealt with all of the sort of side paths that I wanted to deal with before actually making progress. So we're going to try to advance things a little bit. We're going to make use of that shortcut I unlocked. It's a very handy shortcut for several reasons. It gets us to the place with patches very quickly. It gets us to the, well, which, by the way, Spider's still there. But unless 1.00 is very different than the version of the game that I'm used to playing, we should be able to just walk down here with Abandon. Yes, indeed. And gain the treasure there. Another chalice material. So it's very appropriate that we, a Tomb Raider, Tomb Prospector, are here. Okay, and I don't see any other items. We got the shining coins there to attract our attention. So, yep, he fooled us once. Where is he? Where'd he go? Am I not looking? I must not be looking at the right place. Yeah, I wasn't looking at the right place, right? He fooled us once, but he doesn't care about fooling us a second time. This is sort of what I mean. I think this is part of the problem with the presentation of patches in this particular implementation. Right? I don't think Bloodborne has really the best implementation of patches. Probably the most visually interesting, right? The idea that he's this nightmare creature with a spider body and a man's head and some sort of reasoning and sort of possibly dwells in nightmares. That's very interesting. All that backstory around patches is intriguing. But the way that his, like, quote-unquote betrayals work and the, like, ways that you can interact with the event with him kicking you down or potentially attacking him, or, like, the way that this can play out doesn't necessarily make sense. I don't know. And we've already been up there. And now we're going to make use of the other reason this shortcut is so handy, is because it gets us access to this enemy that overlooks another aspect of the swamp. I call it Swamp Part 2 because it's... Oh, man! What a waste. It's far enough away. Yeah, I want you to make slow attacks and move towards me. Yes, correct. Just like that. There we go. Solves the problem of you. Anyway, this, if you can sort of see, this is the land that I sort of ran up on after I fell down. There is a narrow connecting area between the swamp that I was in before, where eventually it will lead to the dead end with the Winter Lantern, and you come through here, and then you make your way to this swamp, and as you can see, there's 2 other giants that will hurl rocks at us at least, that we're going to have to deal with. But, I'm not going to deal with them just yet. I think... I can't remember which way is easier to get back in terms of the trail. Okay, that's what I thought, right? Had to come down here to this corpse before I moved on, because this is, you can see over here, that item that was taunting me from over there. You can't really make that jump all the way over here to get the item and, you know, skip past all that stuff. But from this direction, we totally can. And having taken out this enemy to deal with one of the rock hurlers, we can now come over this way and rejoin more of the standard path. And, yep, there we go. There's a deep sea rune. So, yeah, it's not just lake, it's also deep sea runes. Also, my portable lantern has been off for far too long. It's okay. Uh-oh. It's trapped me. Fortunately, it's still not scary. I wasn't sure how the Tomb Prospector gear would affect my resistance to its attacks, but it doesn't seem to be, impacted too strongly. All right, let's try a Molotov cocktail. There we go. I could throw another one. I'm not going to bother, because I think that's enough that I can now one-shot all of these enemies. Yep. You're very scary, squid things. I wonder if these would be considered the invertebrates that would be the forerunners of the boss in this area. I mean, I guess technically that's giving away. If you're following along with this playthrough and you don't know anything about Bloodborne, I don't think I've done a great job of maintaining all the secrecy here. I've sort of been occupied mostly by concerns that would be the province of people who have, you know, spent a long time with this game over the past 10 years. But maybe these are the forerunners of the creature that we fight at the end of all this. All right, and I don't see any other way to go at this point. I think we just have to take the plunge, go for this item here. Bad man's knowledge. Yeah, this is the one I didn't want to get before for that exact reason. Right. Well, we're not going to let that bother us. We're going to press on. We're going to make use of the glory that is that shortcut, and we're going to retrace our steps in such a way as to, again, take out the one giant that would be hurling rocks at us from one direction, being a little bit more wary of the giants that will hurl rocks at us in other directions. So maybe I should not have been so easily distracted by that item. All right, got to turn this way, because we don't care about going to that other section of the swamp. And we've already gotten all the other events that would come off this path. So let's just head back here. I want to get you this time. Yes! Alright, I'll see you soon, friend. Alright, this time I don't need to worry about... Alright, this doesn't go anywhere. This time I don't need to worry about getting the... What's it called? Getting the other items that are down. Oh, I forgot. You're alive. There's a reason I said I would see you shortly. All right, there we are. So that takes care of that enemy. And now we are at the point where rather than double back onto the path that we came from, we can head over this way. Start making progress through the swamp. Okay, and I think I actually want to go in this direction. Oh, I'm stuck. Oh, not anymore. Cool. Yep, you're all very scary. I'm terrified of you. Get me out of here. Alright, this is the passage I was looking for. Please tell me I still have antidotes. Okay, I don't still have antidotes equipped. Should probably still have antidotes equipped. There we go. It's kind of pointless for me to heal it at this point, but I will. Alright, now. If I have... Yeah, there we go. This is what I was hoping to see. Oh, you're going to run towards me? Uh-oh. Okay, well, that's fine. I can reload the area. Alright. Let's just sneak up behind this guy, nice and quiet-like. And finish him off. This one I know will finish. I can't quite one-shot them with the giant, well, the mega spike attack. But I can do that pretty well. Alright, let's not forget this item while we're here. Alright, another deep sea rune. Again, lots of ways to bolster your defenses in the swamp. And let's reset the game in order to... Oops, reset the game in order to get that Wandering Madness. Alright, yeah, run away from me. Great. You're not safe down there, friend. You might think you are, but you're not. Alright, now, we gotta go quickly, because we got this other giant here that will be happy to hurl more rocks at us. But fortunately... Oh, well... That's fine. The time it takes for you to recover from that is the time it takes my stamina to come back, and you're almost dead, so I'll just finish the job. Alright. Now... Which way? Oh, right, it undoes itself. At this point, I don't have to worry about those giants anymore. I have no more reason to fear any falling rocks. Which means I can get down in the muckety-muck of the swamp And the only dangers I face are these things. And while their movements and attacks are unsettling, they are ultimately not all that great of a threat. And just because, you know, I'm just a little bit vindictive, I want to kill them all. We're just going to clear out this swamp here. Get back some of those lost blood echoes. Also pick up an additional cold blood flower bud, or whatever it's called. That's an interesting item. I haven't gotten to it yet, because it's not to the point where I've looked at all of the materials for the... Is this back where I was before? Yes, okay, I have unwittingly returned to the location of that one giant. That's fine. Yeah, I haven't looked at it. I remember the item name. There's a technical term that florists use, and other people who are like really into plants. They use this like technical term for types of flowers, and they call them bulbs, or I think bulbs is the term. And I think some version of that particular chalice material, as I recall, is a little bit off that specialist use of the term. It's been a long time since I looked at that, so I could be wrong. And I think anyway, the reason I bring it up, the reason I even remember it, is because I think it's interesting sometimes to consider the difference between how normal people use language and how specialists use language, because it's very different. And sometimes... Ooh, I didn't know this thing was here. Well, it's not anymore. Sometimes you want to be paying attention to specialist usage. Sometimes you want to be paying attention to general usage. Sometimes you want to sort of thread a needle. And it's very difficult to say, like, what your priorities are or should be at any given instance. Right? A lot of it depends on the context that you're working in. So... that's why I think that's kind of interesting, but just kind of a thought, neither here nor there. You can tell I'm the person who puts together Translation Born, right? Because really, who cares about any of that at this point, right? Okay. I believe my my vindictiveness is satisfied. Killed a whole bunch of those squid-like enemies. Possibly the invertebrate forerunners of the boss of this section. And I think I've raided all the treasures here, as a Tomb Raider well should. And now, we can press forward to the, essentially, second half of the Nightmare Frontier. No, we do want to go where that giant is, because that's the path forward that he was guarding. Okay, let's cure the poison now that it's not going to continue to stick on us. Heal ourselves up. And are you ready for a scary encounter? I am. Actually, no, I'm not. I lied. Let's just swap those antidotes for sedatives. Because I have a feeling... Yep, there we go. We may be needing them shortly. Now that I'm not in a swamp, I kind of wonder... This is a risky thing for me to wonder, because it's not, as you saw, it's not super easy to navigate that swamp. However... Yes! Oh no, it lived! Oh, and I died. I was too overcome. I was too overcome by joy. That was amazing. Oh, it's so satisfying to send that thing flying. If I had just healed instead of trying to drink that sedative and wasting one of my 3 that I have left, I would have been fine, right? Like, What was I thinking? But just the fact that I got to send it flying, that's perfect. I don't care that I just lost all my blood echoes. Like, we're going to call the episode now. I can't top that. I finally got what I was looking for. Oh, man. All right, I hope you enjoyed that, even a fraction of as much as I enjoyed it. Thank you all very much for sticking with me. I'm going to call it into my hunt for the evening. But as always, I wish all of you good hunting. Oh, come on. I said good hunting. Get me the real menu. All right, for real this time. Good hunting.